Hi everyone. Thank you for LION+MASON for inviting me over here. I've come all the way from London. And I'm going to be talking not so much about how we do design at Cazoo, but really a practical guide in how you can get buy-in when working with either non-engineers, basically, PMs and commercial people that you may work with. So a quick introduction to myself. So I'm Venessa, obviously. I'm a design leader and a problem solver. And I'm really passionate about building inclusive teams, but also just giving designers practical advice that you can kind of work, that you can use day to day, essentially. And I'm a head of UX at Cazoo. So I'll tell you a little bit about Cazoo. We're a unicorn, a tech unicorn. We IPO'd within 2 years. We're really, really customer focused. So we've actually got a value around the customer, which is a great place to be if you're a designer. And we've got around 25 UX folk. So they're a combination of user researchers, service design, content design, and product design. So I speak to designers a lot. And this is kind of what I get, right? So how many of you kind of feel this or have felt this as a designer? Hands up, anyone? Yeah, pretty much. And I get this a lot from my team, from previous people that I've managed as well, even myself as a designer. And my kind of conclusion that I've got to at this stage is, as designers, we need to be a little bit more business driven. Our role, especially in that kind of product trio, when you have a PM, engineering manager, and yourself as a designer, is to bring that user lens to business outcomes. So it's very boring, OKRs, company kind of objectives, but in order for us to get that kind of buy-in, actually we need to kind of be a little bit commercial and really be able to articulate how those things ladder up to OKRs and company objectives. So I'm hoping that most people are in a cross-functional team or have worked in a cross-functional team. Hands up? Got some nods? Okay, cool. So you're a designer. You're the only designer in the team. It's meant to be like one team, one dream, but it's not really because you're the only designer. So often you're outnumbered. A lot of the time it's about quick delivery. So how can I deliver something quickly? Thin slices, all of that stuff. And a lot of your stakeholders are about metrics, right? They want to know, how is this going to move this metric? And I think the key to highlighting that user value as a designer, one of the two tactics that you really need to kind of adopt is communication and collaboration. So those are the two keys that I kind of observe. And the best designers that I see are not necessarily the most talented ones, controversially, but it's the ones that are really great at collaboration and really great at communication. So as designers, we're always telling design stories, right? We're always presenting our ideas. We're always maybe even talking to users. You're always telling a story. And what I say to this audience is to tell more stories, right? So share your insights. So say, for example, if you've just done a round of user testing, a whole day of user testing, quickly do a TLDR of what you've learned. Share where you are in your design process. So often there's stand-ups that happen. Make sure you're actually saying something and saying where you are in that design process. So maybe you're in discovery and you're due to finish at this time. Also, share what you're doing and why. That's been cut off. I didn't check my slides properly. Sorry. So share what you're doing and why. So this is really important, especially if you've got people who've never worked with designers and don't understand the design process or the double diamond or any of that stuff. Share why you're doing user testing. Or even what happened actually the other day is we had to explain to stakeholders why we test with 5 people. And not 10 or not 30. So we still have to do that to stakeholders who are used to working with us for like 2+ years. So often we have to, as designers, really explain things that we think, you should know this by now. I've been working with you for a long time. This is what we do. But you have to repeat it quite often, actually. People have short memories. Right. So I did go down some kind of movie reference rabbit hole, so it's to the little bubbles. But anyway, when you are communicating, remember to think about data. So do you have any data that you can link to why you've done what you've done? So it could be task completion data. It could be some metrics around click-through rate, things like that. But see if you can link that to your designs and why you've done what you've done. Again, see how you can ladder up to those business goals, right? So how can what you've designed essentially move that OKR or that company objective? And time box. So this goes back to when you're talking about your design process and where you are in the design process. Give people timelines. It doesn't mean that you need to squeeze all your discovery into 2 weeks or a sprint, but it does mean that you need to communicate when you're going to be doing something and when you're going to finish that and what your plan is. It helps people have more confidence in you as a designer, but also it gives people an idea of, when you're going to finish. And lastly, think ahead, right? So you're often going to be designing a feature, but actually how does that fit into the wider objective or the wider strategy of what you're working on? So going into collaboration, it's really about taking people along the journey. So I'm pretty sure you've all got that stakeholder who always has those ideas or wants you to do an idea that they have. It may not have any there's no research behind it, it's just a random idea, right? But key collaboration sessions is that place where you can get those stakeholders who have ideas to basically give you all their ideas. So you could do a workshop. A sketching workshop is really good with stakeholders. But there's also other sessions that you can use, that you can collaborate with. One of my favorites is pairing with non-designers when researching. So when you are doing user testing, for example, I like to get engineers to come in and observe, but I also like to get them to do notes, so I put them to work. And you can get other non-designers to do that as well. Really quick win. One, they're listening to what users are saying. Two, they can form an understanding of why you're designing what you're designing and where you're getting those insights from. And lastly, pair with PMs on product strategy. So product strategy seems like a very PM thing to do, but if you can get involved in that, and if you can start adding in your user insights into that strategy, again, it gives that user lens to that strategy rather than just commercials. Because a lot of companies now, like Cazoo has changed quite a bit, going from extreme growth to just talking about commercials. Everything's about GPU, everything's about unit economics. I'm terrible at numbers and finance, but I still need to kind of understand all of these terms. And one of the things that I had great success with is working with product to give that user lens and the commercial side of things, because they're just looking at spreadsheets and numbers. But I'm that person that'd be like, but what do I users kind of think about this? It makes sense from a commercial side of it, but will users actually buy into this? How do they feel about this? And that's where us as designers come into play. Another thing that I hear quite regularly is design wasn't involved early enough, right? So you heard earlier from David, where things just happen, and you see a feature or an idea happens, and you're like, why wasn't design involved in this? And I think the key thing is really to try and bring design in early to help influence, one, the product strategy, and two, the business goals. And in order to do that, we need to be more strategic. So essentially everyone kind of knows this part. The earlier the research, the more impact the findings will have in your product. And by definition, the earliest you could do something on a current project is today, right? And as designers, you need to think more strategically to create that influence, right? So that goes back to that thinking ahead piece. So if you can think ahead before your PM, you can, when you're doing, say, user testing or speaking to users, you can maybe ask some questions around something, an idea that you're thinking about. How do they feel about it? Start bringing a bigger picture to things. So how do you start thinking strategically as a designer, right? It's all about getting ahead of the game. So think about how does this help with the mission and the vision of the team. Again, sorry if my slides got cut off. Thinking about creating a North Star. So maybe a secret kind of North Star design, but the key is validating it with the users. So again, trying to get that data in place. So when you are doing your testing and your user validation, you can maybe squeeze out 5 minutes or 10 minutes to ask some questions around this North Star or get someone to, what do they think about it? And then once you get all those insights, you can use those insights again to help with that product strategy, right? So you'd get hopefully some direct quotes, or you'll get some stats around 3 out of the 5 users that we spoke to really like this idea. I think there's something in it, right? And again, that helps with things like the opportunity solution tree and prioritization. So it gives you more data to get that buy-in from not only commercial partners, but also PMs that you work with. So in summary, expose your design process. Tell people, don't mention the double diamond because people don't understand it outside of a design. Basically just say where you are in the process, why you're in that area, that place, and when it's going to be finished. Bring others into your process as well. So if you can partner with non-designers, it's always better because it helps demystify design, essentially. And remember to articulate the business value. So why you're doing what you're doing, why is this going to create an impact, why is this important, essentially. And lastly, just tell design stories, essentially. That's what we do as designers. Keep telling those design stories. And that is it. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you want. I'll be around, so definitely speak to me or ask me any questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant.